everyone, and either welcome or welcome back to the Gender Libertarian podcast. If you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, Libertarian Institute, and I do also now have a Patreon page where if you're one of my subscribers, you do get early access to my podcast episodes, and I will put the link down in the show notes. So I am finally doing my promised episode on the Libertarian to alt-right pipeline. And I will go ahead and preface this by saying, yes, I know this is a very controversial topic. Yes, I know it's a very sensitive topic, but it is one that I feel like does need to be discussed a little more fully than it normally gets discussed, because a lot of people get very angry and defensive about it, and it's completely understandable. But I still want to have this conversation and to make this episode, so I'll go ahead and start. I'm going to start with giving like my functional working definition of alt-right for the purposes of this podcast, so that I don't have to keep saying all of these words every time, and I can just use alt-right as a catch term for all of these people who are white nationalist or white ethno-states or neo-Nazis or whatever the hell they call themselves nowadays. The name changes so often, but you kind of have a general idea of what I mean. And I mean, I would assume if you're listening to this episode, you kind of already know the kind of people that we're talking about anyway. So just to get that out of the way, and to go ahead and just answer off the rip, is there a libertarian to alt-right pipeline? It depends on how you define that particular phrase. And I think there are two definitions, or at least two different ways that people mean it, or at least that there's two different ways that people take it when it is being said. I think a lot of libertarians take it as, when people say there's a libertarian to alt-right pipeline, that there's this insinuation that there's something inherent in libertarianism that causes people to go alt-right. I don't think that is what everybody who uses that term means. I think what a lot of the people who use that term mean is pointing out the fact that, yes, there are people who did at one point, or still do, identify as libertarians, but do hold these very alt-right views. I think that is one of the big disconnects where I think where a lot of this is breaking down, and where a lot of people start getting very defensive without asking for clarification as to what somebody means when they say there's a libertarian to alt-right pipeline. And to be fair, there are people that say it who are either point blank saying or intimating that there is something to do with libertarianism that makes people go alt-right. We all know that is not true, because we are libertarians. We actually understand the philosophy. We understand the idea of individualism versus collectivism, and that if you are espousing a collectivist ideology, by definition, it cannot be libertarian. We know this because we live here. Other people don't live here. And so I think that is really one of the first things that, when you encounter that, it kind of needs to be explained. But I'll circle back around to that, because there's a couple other things that I want to get to before I get to how we fix this image problem, because that is what this is. I mean, we know for a fact that there isn't a libertarian to alt-right pipeline, yet the image persists. And so because the image persists, yes, it's a problem. The first argument that everybody wants to make when people point out people like, say, Stefan Molyneux or Lauren Southern or any of those types who did at one point identify as libertarians but now are doing what the fuck ever, is that they were never really libertarians. Again, we know that. Other people don't know that. All they know is that those people identified as libertarians, and now they're off the freaking reservation. I don't even know. Like, I don't even know what the hell these people are doing anymore. But when they took the label, it stuck. And so people associate the label of libertarianism with these sorts of people. And it's not just the famous people. I mean, there's plenty of other non-famous people who have taken kind of that same path, that have taken the label of libertarianism, slapped it on themselves, not really being libertarians, really being alt-right people the whole time, but because you claimed the mantle, you put on the label, and you identified publicly as a libertarian, now people have that image of libertarianism as being these people. These people. And like I said, is it fair? No. Is it nitpicking? Yes. Is it still an issue that we have to deal with? Yes. Whether you think it's fair or not, whether you think it's right to hold up certain people and try to use them as an illustration for all of libertarianism, it's kind of irrelevant to the fact that that is what happens. And certain people do that, and certain people do it. And if you spend any time on social media, if you see anybody talk about libertarianism who is not part of the movement, this shit always comes up. That we are a bunch of racists or white supremacists or neo-Nazis. So again, it's not a fun topic. It's not something that anybody is really excited about talking about, but it's out there. And so it has to be combated. There we go. But moving on to why I think some of these people, both famous and non-famous, came through libertarianism. And I'll go ahead and start with the famous people. There was a time, some of you might not have been here, you might be young baby libertarians and you might not remember, but there was indeed, for a brief shining moment, a libertarian moment where it was cool to be a libertarian, and it was edgy and fun, and you were like the it kids, and we were kind of having a moment. It really did happen. I promise you. It was like 10 minutes long, but it happened. I swear to God I was there for it. But I think during that time, a lot of the kind of the grifter types, I mean, I'll just go ahead and put it out there. A lot of people who were trying to make their name, become famous, kind of claimed libertarianism. They also claimed anarchism and tried to pivot that into being some kind of edgy person who was just full of these ideas that are just, wow, so big, woo. And and like I've said, not that they were ever really libertarians to begin with, but they took the label. And I think a lot of those people left libertarianism when it became obvious that there was a hell of a lot more money in going alt-right. I mean, it's just following the grift. It's following the money. So I think for a lot of the more famous-y types, I think that was the transition. And I mean, I don't know what you do about that, but I mean, it's there, and again, it's worth talking about that. I mean, there are people that kind of latch on to ideologies, and for some people, we are a fringe ideology because there's money in it. Yeah. Anyway, moving on to the non-famous-y people. I think the appeal of libertarianism to a lot of people who don't really stick around or aren't really interested in understanding the tenets of libertarianism and what it's about is this kind of very, very surface level, sort of very, not even bird's eye view, like standing on top of Mount Everest and looking all the way down at the ground view of libertarianism, is that they see that we support the ideas of free speech and free association and of the freedom to live your life in the way that you choose to. And so people kind of latch on to those particular topics and think, okay, these people support this, so therefore they will support my whatever the hell comes out of my mouth, or whatever kind of ridiculous collectivist ideology I want to espouse, and that they will support that. Not understanding that just because we say that you have the right to say something does not mean we support every wackadoo statement that comes out of your mouth, or that because we say, all right, you have the freedom to choose how to live your life in whatever way you want, that means we automatically support whatever choices you make. So I think there was a little bit of misunderstanding when a lot of these alt-right types kind of came into libertarianism, because, like I said, they were thinking that supporting an ideal meant that we would support them personally and individually, which clearly we do not, obviously. But I think a lot of people kind of got a little confused on that. And once they kind of figured out, like, oh, okay, this isn't really that, they just kind of moved on. But again, because they once wore the label, then all of a sudden it becomes this pejorative against all of us that, like, oh, okay, well, you had these alt-right people in your movement, you had these racist people in your movement, and then that means that your movement is racist and alt-right. I mean, and like I said, it's not fair. It's not fair. I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form that it's fair that we have to deal with this, but we do. And the other reason I think a lot of people, and not even alt-right people, but I think maybe even just a lot of people in general, first kind of come into libertarianism, and whether they stay or not is wholly dependent on whether you actually believe in the tenets of libertarianism or it's this surface level sort of thing. But to steal the Thomas Massey quote about Ron Paul, people just wanting to support the craziest son of a bitch in the room. And in 2008 and in 2012, that was Ron Paul. So a lot of people kind of came into the movement because of Ron Paul, and a lot of us have stayed here because of Ron Paul, and because we kind of got introduced into it through that, and then we kind of looked around, it's like, oh, okay, I can get down with this. But a lot of people saw Ron, and they were like, that guy is nuts. I love him. Kind of the same way that people love Bernie, or the same way that people love Trump, when they just say these insane, crazy things, and then people just like connect with it. And not that Ron Paul was saying crazy, insane things, but just that kind of, that energy, that being that person in the room that is just speaking what you view as truth to power, or just not playing the political game, or however you view it. And like I said, a lot of those people stayed. A lot of them moved on to the alt-right because, again, you're still looking for the craziest son of a bitch in the room because you want to support that for whatever reason. Maybe you're just tired of politics as usual, which is a reason a lot of people gave for supporting Trump, because he was the craziest son of a bitch in the room. So, and there's that, and then there's just people who want to latch onto somebody because they think it gives them this edgier sort of persona or personality than they actually have. I don't know, but again, when people come through your movement, they take your label, it sticks, and then people who want to portray you in a negative light pick these people, and they say, oh, these racist motherfuckers once identified as libertarian, so therefore, it sucks, but this is what we have to deal with. So, why do I care, and why should you care? Here's my thing. I would like to, this is kind of like my own little personal project. I would like to start doing a lot more outreach to people who are feeling politically homeless, because I have not seen anything from either party that leads me to believe that there is going to be not only anything approaching centrism, but anything that isn't full-bore authoritarianism from either the Republicans or the Democrats. So people who are not down with that are going to all of a sudden be not even like leave the parties. They're going to be shoved out of the parties. Like it's going to increasingly become abundant to these people that there's no place for them there. And so I would like there to be a place here for them. At least those who are down with the ideas of, personal liberty and autonomy and freedom and scaling back the government and just getting government out of people's lives so that people can live their lives the way they want to. I think that is a message that will resonate with a lot of people. Just selling libertarianism as the usual catchphrase that is used about us, we want to take over the world and leave you alone. I think that's going to start becoming a much more appealing message. But in order to get people comfortable with taking on the libertarian tag and self-identifying as libertarians, we have to look at the negative connotations that come along with that right now. And this is one of them. And I mean, some of our criticisms are deserved, some of them are not. This one is clearly not, but like I keep saying, it's there, so we have to deal with it. And so we have to get past these sorts of things that make people uncomfortable with publicly identifying as a libertarian. There are so many people that I see that I think are libertarians, or at least agree with us 80% of the way, but they don't want to take on the label for various sorts of reasons, and I think it is very worthwhile and of value to the movement to understand why somebody who agrees with our positions, be they philosophical positions or policy positions, would not want to publicly identify as a libertarian. That's going to be very important for growing the movement. So that's why I care. That's why I'm making this episode, so that we can try to figure out a way to move the dialogue about libertarianism past this, so that maybe people who are scared to take on the label, and I've heard people actually say that they're scared to publicly identify as a libertarian, which is something that, I mean, when I did it, I didn't give it a second thought. Like, there were like 10 other things that I thought about before even remotely thinking about, okay, what's it going to be like to be a libertarian in public? Like, I was way more concerned about whether my name was going to be out there, whether my gender. I was way more worried about stuff like that. It never occurred to me to like worry about being labeled a libertarian. But anyway, that is a concern people have. And so, again, is it fair? No. Is it something we have to deal with? Yes. So, how do we deal with this? I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this, because it's certain people have tried to handle this in ways that I feel are kind of ham-fisted and have not produced the results that need to be produced, because obviously we're still having this conversation. And yes, I think the Sarwalk, the petition thing after Charlottesville has been debated to death. I'm really kind of tired of that whole conversation. I wish everybody involved could just sit down and like hug it out and just work out our differences, so that going forward we can have something of a unified front, because obviously our numbers are not that large, people. We kind of need each other. So maybe if we can figure this the fuck out. But I think the best way to try to combat this is to explain as best as possible. And when I say explain as best as possible, I don't mean going on like a 20-minute diatribe about it. I mean, try to fit this on like an index card if you can, preferably even a bumper sticker if you can, to explain why libertarians do not support alt-right positions. And again, it's something that each person is going to have to kind of figure out for themselves, because everybody communicates in their own way. So trying to create a template, I don't know if that is like the super best way to do it, because like I said, everybody has their own personal comfort level in talking to other people and kind of espousing political ideologies to other people. But I would say, if you had to like kind of sum it up in a single sentence, I would do something along the lines of trying to make that point clear between an individualist ideology and a collectivist ideology, and how in libertarianism, alt-right ideas just are not compatible. They do not fit in any way, shape, or form. Explain that however you wish or in whatever way that you are most comfortable with, but I think that if you had to give a short answer, that would be the best short answer. If you wanted to give a longer answer, or if you wanted to give a more smartass answer, you could point out that those who went through the quote-unquote libertarian to alt-right pipeline left libertarianism. So clearly they figured out that there was nothing here for them, and so it should be abundantly obvious that we're not compatible. But again, this goes down to your level of communicating with other people and how much of a smartass versus how much of a genuinely serious answering the question straight person you want to be. And I'm trying to think if there's some other short ways of doing this. And like I said, without going off into a whole tangent on it, because that the tangents come off as defensive. I would try to keep the answers as short as humanly possible while still conveying the notion that no, libertarians are not alt-right. We're not compatible with alt-right ideas. We don't like these people. Like, that's another thing, is to try to figure out a way to make it abundantly clear that no, we do not support these ideologies because they are stupid and counterproductive and does not fit in our movement. Again, you can do that however you want, but I wanted to go ahead and make this episode, obviously, because like I said, it's something that I think needs to be addressed going forward, especially if we do plan on growing this movement, because, I mean, it's a public perception problem, and public perception problems have to be fixed in order for people to feel comfortable joining your movement. It's just like how the GOP right now has to deal with people thinking they're a bunch of racists, which I'm sure there are some Republicans. I'm sure there's some fine Republicans on both sides. No, there's not fine Republicans on one of those sides, but you got to deal with that. And obviously the Democrats have to deal with being a bunch of socialists, whether it's actually true or not, or it's just people nitpicking on both of those sides. It doesn't matter once that becomes the public perception of your party. So when people have a negative opinion of your party and it's not correct, you have to figure out a way to fix it. So anyway, on that note, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. So if you did make it this far, thank you for listening. And if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, Libertarian Institute, and on my Patreon page. Link will be in the show notes. Take care, and until next time.